picture this, just imagine for a second that you were living in a massive ancient city.
Okay, I am picturing it.
And for an entire year, when you look up at the night sky, there is a literal glowing, fiery sword just hanging there directly over the city walls.
Oh, wow. That is terrifying.
Right. It does not move at all. It just hangs there like this silent, terrifying omen.
Yeah.
And then one evening just before sunset, you look out and see actual chariots and armed battalions hovering in the clouds.
Like a mirage or something.
Yeah, but surrounding the cities in the distance. And I mean, it sounds like a dark fantasy novel.
It really does.
But these are the actual historical records written by a hostile military commander documenting the fall of his own nation. Welcome to Reformed thinking.
Glad to be here.
Usually when we evaluate a historical figure, there is this sort of expectation of looking primarily at their moral teachings.
Right, sure.
We look at their philosophy, maybe the nice things they said, and we debate their ideas. But it is all very subjective.
It is. It relies heavily on personal interpretation.
Highly subjective. But what if you could prove the validity of a historical figure, not just by the comforting words they spoke, but by the statistically impossible precision of their predictions?
Now, that is a huge shift in perspective.
Right. What if we could look at history like an engineering schematic, where the blueprint matches the building without a single millimeter of error?
That changes the entire conversation, honestly. We are no longer talking about just philosophy. Yeah. We are talking about verifiable, hard data.
Spot on. And that is our destination today for you listening. We have laid out a massive stack of historical notes from Jonathan Edwards.
Specifically his writings on the prophecies of Christ.
Yeah. And for those of you who might just know Edwards as like an old preacher, it really helps to understand that in his private notebooks, he was essentially doing the mathematical scratchpad work for his theology.
He was a highly analytical thinker.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack Edwards' arguments on how Jesus demonstrated his divine authority through prophecy.
We are going to look into the highly specific predictions, the shocking historical fulfillments, and the massive theological shifts that followed.
So if you are ready for some surprising facts and a few serious aha moments, let's just jump right in.
I am really looking forward to this. Edwards is known for his rigorous logic.
Oh, yeah.
And the way he structures this argument is just staggering.
It really is.
He builds this cumulative case that basically forces the reader to confront the mathematical and historical improbability of these events occurring by chance.
Okay, let's unpack this from the start. Before we even look at the specific events that were predicted, we have to examine the highly unusual manner in which the predictions were made.
Right, the style of delivery.
Yeah, deep in his notes, Edwards makes a huge point about this. We need to look at the anatomy of authority here.
What stands out to me here is the contrast Edwards draws between the ancient Old Testament prophets and Jesus.
Okay. Break that down for us.
Well, if you read the ancient prophets, guys like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they always introduce their visions with a very specific formula.
Like a sign-off or an intro.
An intro. They would say, hear the word of the Lord, or thus saith the Lord.
Oh, right. Making it crystal clear that they were just the messengers.
Precisely.
They were taking zero credit for the information. It is, it's the difference between a mail carrier reading a letter from the king in the town square versus the king himself standing on the balcony issuing a royal decree.
That is a great analogy.
Like the mail carrier says, the king says taxes are going up. They want you to know they're just reading the memo. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, they were conduits. But Jesus operates entirely differently.
How so?
He does not use that formula at all. Instead, he uses the phrase, verily, verily, I say unto you.
Right.
Or in the original Greek, amen, amen, I say to you. He speaks on his own authority.
Which is a huge departure.
It is. Furthermore, Edwards points out that Jesus predicted events as things that he would personally bring to pass.
The king himself issuing the decree.
Fun.
He says things like, I will raise it up, referring to his own resurrection. Or, I have authority to lay my life down, and I have authority to take it again.
He even says he will personally send the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And he tells his disciples that whatever they ask in his name, he will do it.
He claims he will give them a mouth and wisdom that their adversaries will not be able to resist.
He is claiming total sovereignty over future events.
But I want to pause and think about the strategy here. Let's say I am running a massive historical scam.
Okay, playing devil's advocate.
Yeah. This seems like a terrible way to do it.
Why is that?
Well, If I want people to follow me, I want plausible deniability. I want to say, God might do this, or the heavens will move in mysterious ways.
Because you have an out.
Right. So if it fails, I can blame a lack of faith or mysterious divine will. But by saying, I will personally rise from the dead, or I will personally send the Spirit, he is backing himself into a corner.
He really is.
Doesn't that set an impossibly high bar that would immediately expose a fraud?
It absolutely does. The margin for error is zero.
Zero.
If we connect this to the broader context of Jewish law at the time, God established very strict rules in Deuteronomy chapter 18 for identifying false prophets.
I remember this. The rules were pretty harsh.
The rule was simple and brutal. If the thing does not come to pass, the prophet is false, and the penalty is death by stoning.
Wow.
You do not get a second chance to clarify your vision.
The stakes were ultimate. You were putting your life on the line every time you make a prediction.
Ultimate stakes. Additionally, Edwards brings in Isaiah chapter 41, where God actually mocks the idols of the heathens.
Oh, I love that passage.
Yeah, he challenges these false gods to foretell the future. God frames the foreseeing of the future as a strictly divine prerogative.
He basically calls them out.
He does. God says to the idols, show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods.
So foretelling the future is the ultimate litmus test for divinity in the Jewish context.
It is the only test that matters in that specific regard.
Which means claiming you can do it is either the height of madness or the absolute truth.
And Jesus goes a step further.
Oh, right, the disciples.
Yes. He promises to give his disciples the ability to prophesy through the Holy Spirit. He says, the Spirit will show you things to come.
He is essentially franchising his prophetic authority to a bunch of fishermen.
Which multiplies the risk exponentially.
Think about the liability there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if he is a fraud, he is now relying on a dozen other guys to maintain the illusion of prophetic foresight.
Good luck with that.
Right. Edwards argues that if Jesus were a false claimant, Providence would have exposed him immediately.
The intense scrutiny of his generation would have caught him.
Oh, completely. They were armed with the strict rules of Deuteronomy 18. They would have crushed the movement the moment one of these highly specific, personally guaranteed predictions failed.
And the generation he lived in was not gullible. They were watching him like hawks.
They wanted a reason to dismiss him.
And he hands them the ultimate test. He basically says, watch what happens next. I am guaranteeing it.
Yeah.
It really is a terrible strategy for a con artist, but a perfectly logical one for someone who actually holds the authority they claim.
That leads us to the historical fulfillments.
Because he did not just make vague predictions about a spiritual kingdom in the clouds.
No, he made terrifyingly concrete predictions about the physical world.
Let's transition to the devastation of AD 70 then. Because Jesus set the bar incredibly high, and the destruction of Jerusalem is where that bar was met with chilling accuracy.
It is the most verifiable historical fulfillment in this entire stack of notes.
So walk us through the records.
In the records of Matthew and Luke, Jesus predicts the total destruction of Jerusalem. Not just a defeat in battle, but a complete leveling of the city.
He says, your house is left unto you desolate.
Yes? And speaks of enemies casting a trench about the city, compassing it round and keeping them in on every side.
And he gives a timeline, too.
He states unequivocally that this will all happen before that specific generation passes away.
But it was not just a broad prediction of doom. You know, anyone could say, this city will fall someday.
True. But Edwards outlines 8 highly specific signs that Jesus said would precede this destruction.
He basically gave them a checklist.
A very detailed checklist. False messiahs, rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, and fearful sights from heaven.
Let's match those up, because Edwards maps this perfectly to the historical record.
Right, specifically under the Roman emperors Caligula, Claudius, and Nero.
Let's look at the context.
During this period, the historian Josephus records that several impostors arose.
Claiming they would rescue the people from the Roman yoke.
Yes, checking off the false messiah's box. Then came the rumors of war.
Caligula, right.
Yeah, Emperor Caligula demanded his statue be placed in the Jewish temple.
For the Jews, this was the ultimate blasphemy.
It almost triggered a massive suicidal rebellion. They offered their own necks to the Roman swords rather than see it happen.
But Caligula died suddenly.
He did, blowing the storm over temporarily, but the societal anxiety was just off the charts.
The tension was building. And then the natural disasters started hitting, right on schedule.
Under Claudius Caesar, a massive famine hit Judea.
And pestilences always follow famine.
Because malnourished bodies cannot fight off disease. Earthquakes struck in various places during the reigns of Claudius and Nero.
And what about the wars?
Nation literally rose against nation, with thousands of Jews slain in Alexandria and Babylon in brutal ethnic conflicts.
So everything Jesus outlined was ticking off, one by one.
One by one.
And then we get to the fearful sights from heaven. This is the part of the deep dive that really blew my mind.
It is pretty shocking.
You mentioned the historian Josephus earlier. Let's bring in the details Edwards pulls from him, because Josephus recorded things that are frankly terrifying.
Like the fiery sword you mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah. Walk us through what Josephus actually wrote.
He wrote about a fiery sword that hung over the city of Jerusalem. And it did not just appear for a night. It hung there for an entire year.
Just suspended.
Yes. He also describes a comet that shone so brightly in the temple and about the altar that it looked like daytime in the middle of the night.
And the chariots hovering in the air. When I read this part of Edwards' notes, I honestly had to pause.
It feels unbelievable. But Josephus records that one evening, before sunset, chariots and armed battalions were seen in the clouds, encompassing the cities.
He notes that the people who saw it were terrified, and it was widely reported.
Very widely reported.
Okay, here is where my skeptical alarm bells ring.
Let's hear it.
It is incredibly convenient to have a historian back up these highly specific, almost supernatural claims.
Sure.
If I am looking at this subjectively, I have to ask, wait, is Josephus a Christian sympathizer?
That is the most logical question to ask.
Like, is this just a Christian writing a history book decades later to make Jesus look good after the fact? That would neatly explain the perfect alignment between the prophecy and the historical record.
That is a fair concern, but this raises a crucial detail that Edwards emphasizes heavily.
Okay.
Josephus was absolutely not a Christian.
Really?
No. He was a Jewish historian, a Pharisee, and a military commander who actually fought against the Romans in Galilee before surrendering and working for them.
Wow, okay.
He actively avoided mentioning the Christian name or Jesus whenever possible.
He had zero theological motivation to validate the prophecies of Jesus.
Zero. So he is a completely hostile witness.
If anything, he had every reason to suppress anything that might make the Christians look right.
Because the Christians were seen as a rogue, heretical sect.
Correct. His historical account of the Jewish war is considered highly objective.
It is one of the most detailed ancient histories we possess. He is writing to document the tragic end of his own nation.
Right.
When he describes these signs in the sky, he's lamenting that his people ignored them.
He blamed the people.
Yeah, he says, this wretched people believed impostors and counterfeits, but those great signs and prodigies which did forerun their desolation, they neither minded nor believed.
That brings a heavy, tragic weight to the whole thing.
It really does.
And the tragedy only deepens when you look at the poetic irony Edwards highlights regarding the siege itself.
The timing is incredible.
Right. The Romans, led by Titus, began the siege of Jerusalem at the Passover.
The very season Jesus was crucified.
The city was packed with pilgrims for the festival.
We are talking about hundreds of thousands of extra people inside the walls.
This massive population swell rapidly accelerated the famine when the Roman siege walls went up.
The food ran out almost immediately.
And Edwards points out this grim detail. During the siege, the Romans were crucifying up to 500 Jews a day outside the walls.
500 a day.
They did this until they literally ran out of wood for the crosses in the surrounding countryside.
It is a horrifying mirror to the crowd's cry decades earlier to crucify him.
And the people who had bought Jesus for 30 pieces of silver,
Yes.
their descendants were sold into slavery by the Romans at an even cheaper rate.
Because the slave market was so flooded with Jewish captives.
It is a terrifying symmetry.
It is the brutal reality of historical consequence. Josephus estimates that 1 million people died from famine and the sword during the siege.
1 million people.
And the factional fighting inside the city was so severe that Jewish zealots actually burned their own food supplies to force the moderates to fight the Romans.
It led to mass starvation.
It was unparalleled devastation.
Which makes me wonder, why was there no prophet to warn the Jews of this specific destruction?
What do you mean?
Well, during the Babylonian captivity centuries earlier, God sent Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk.
True.
They were shouting from the rooftops that Babylon was coming. They gave warnings for years. Why was there no traditional prophet for Rome?
Edwards addresses this directly. He notes that God was silent for about 500 years before sending Jesus.
A 500-year gap.
Yes, there was a perfect silence regarding this specific massive Roman desolation.
Why?
Because the warning was delivered by the prophet of prophets. God did not send a standard messenger, because he sent his son.
The warning was given with maximum authority.
And accompanied by miracles.
And the fact that God preserves such an incredibly detailed historical record of this event through a non-Christian like Josephus allows later generations, like us, to verify the precision of the warning.
We do not have to take a leap of faith that Jerusalem fell exactly how Jesus said it would.
We have the receipts from the Romans and the Jewish historians.
The physical destruction of the city was horrifying, yes.
Yeah.
The loss of life was staggering. But the physical demolition is really only half the story.
The physical burning of the temple wasn't just a loss of architecture. It was the literal burning of their ability to follow the law of Moses. Which brings us to the unseen demolition that happened in the rubble. The theological shockwave of AD 70 altered the entire globe.
It changed everything.
And you might be asking, why should you, the listener, care about a building burning down 2,000 years ago? Because it basically birthed the modern concept of religion.
Jesus did not just predict a political war, he predicted the abolition of an entire religious dispensation.
Let's define that term for the listener.
When we say dispensation, we mean an era, a specific way God administers his household.
So the Mosaic system was a dispensation.
Yes, with all its dietary laws, sacrifices, and temple rituals. When Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "The hour cometh, when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father," he was announcing a total paradigm shift.
Let's break down the mechanics of why the destruction of the temple was a fatal blow to that system.
Okay.
They lost the building, sure, but why couldn't they just rebuild it later or, I don't know, sacrifice animals in their backyards?
The law was incredibly strict about this. The temple was the only authorized location for the sacrificial system.
So no backyard altars.
Strictly forbidden. It was the only authorized slaughterhouse for Finn. You could not just build an altar wherever you wanted.
So when the Romans burned the temple down and made it desolate, they halted the core mechanism of Jewish worship.
They did. But the permanent fatal blow actually has to do with the genealogical records.
Ah, right. The dispersion of the Jews into all nations, which Jesus also explicitly predicted.
When the city was destroyed, the records kept in the temple were incinerated.
Down forever.
Gone. The surviving Jews were scattered across the known world. This meant that the tribal lineages were completely scrambled and lost.
Walk us through why that is the nail in the coffin.
Well, to have a legitimate priest, you must be able to prove direct descent from the tribe of Levi.
Specifically the family of Aaron.
Yes. Once those genealogical records went up in smoke and the people intermingled in the diaspora, it became physically and legally impossible to ever uphold the ceremonial law again.
Because you can't verify anyone's lineage.
Right. You cannot appoint a legitimate priest today because nobody can conclusively prove they are from the line of Aaron.
And without a priest.
You cannot offer a legitimate sacrifice. Without sacrifice, the entire Mosaic system is permanently frozen.
Wow.
Edwards notes that this blurring of the lineages blotted out the families of Aaron and Levi forever.
It is like a city council not only demolishing a massive municipal building, but intentionally burning the original blueprints.
Yes.
And then firing the architects and outlawing the specific tools needed to rebuild it. The scaffolding is gone, and the means to recreate it are gone forever.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
It's permanent.
And to illustrate the finality of this, Edwards cites an observation by a theologian named Mr. Charnock.
What did Charnock notice?
Charnock points out an incredible historical reality. The custom of animal sacrifice was not just a Jewish thing.
Oh, right.
It was universally practiced by almost all nations. Time out of mind, as he puts it.
So everyone was doing it.
The Greeks, the Romans, the Babylonians, they all sacrificed animals to their gods.
It was the standard religious practice globally.
But since the time of Christ,
Yeah.
and specifically following the events of the first century, that universal custom has dwindled away and ceased among almost all nations.
The entire globe just stopped sacrificing animals.
Almost entirely.
We take it for granted today that religion involves singing, praying, and listening to a sermon. But for thousands of years, religion meant blood.
It meant slaughtering an animal.
And then, historically speaking, it just stops.
The theological shockwave did not just dismantle the Jewish temple, it disrupted the sacrificial impulse of the human race.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Could a skeptic argue that this was all just inevitable politics?
How so?
Judea was a volatile region. The Jews hated the Romans. The Romans were brutal and had zero tolerance for rebellion. Anyone with decent political awareness could have guessed that eventually the Romans would get tired of the insurrections and come crush the city.
That is a common objection.
Is it really divine foreknowledge or just astute political commentary by Jesus?
It is a reasonable objection on the surface. But Edwards counters it by pointing to what he calls the spiritual signatures on the event.
Spiritual signatures.
Yes. This was not a standard political conquest. The timing of the calamities was far too precise.
Like the Passover thing.
Exactly. Edwards notes that the worst of the slaughter and destruction frequently fell on the Sabbath day and during the great festivals.
When the maximum number of worshippers were gathered.
They were gathered, expecting divine protection because they were observing the law.
And that's when the hammer fell.
Right. This indicates a targeted dismantling of a religious system. God was showing in real time that these festivals and Sabbaths no longer held their ancient protective covenant status.
It wasn't random.
No. Edwards argues that this was a deliberate shift by the moral governor of the universe, ending the era of the physical, localized temple and replacing it with a spiritual, rational service fit for all nations.
A rational service fit for all nations. That phrase carries so much weight.
It really does.
It means the religion was no longer tied to one specific zip code in the Middle East. It was untethered.
And that untethering was structurally necessary. If Christianity was going to be a global faith, it could not be dependent on a single physical altar in Jerusalem.
Because you can't have believers in Great Britain taking a boat to Judea every time they need to offer a sacrifice.
Exactly. The destruction of the temple forced the final break. The old system was permanently shut down, proving that the era of the Messiah had arrived.
While the old system was being torn down in a fiery catastrophe, a new system was facing impossible odds.
The early church.
Right. And I want to shift our focus here to the prophecies regarding the fate of the early Christians themselves, because the story of the gospel inside the Roman machine is the story of an utterly unlikely triumph.
Jesus was incredibly candid with his followers about what was coming.
He didn't sugarcoat it.
He did not sell them a prosperity gospel. He predicted massive discouragements. He told them they would be hated of all nations for his name's sake.
He predicted they would be brought before kings and rulers.
He even gave them highly specific predictions about their own deaths.
Walk us through those predictions.
Well, he predicted that James and John, the sons of Zebedee, would drink of his cup.
Meaning they would face martyrdom?
Yes, we see James killed with the sword in the book of Acts.
And Peter.
He predicted the specific manner of Peter's death. Jesus told Peter that when he was old, he would stretch forth his hands, and another would gird him and carry him where he would not want to go.
Which everyone listening at the time understood as a clear reference to crucifixion.
And historical records indicate Peter was indeed crucified in Rome in his old age.
About 40 years after the prediction.
Right. But the physical persecution from the state was really only one layer of the discouragement.
There was more.
Jesus also predicted severe betrayal from within.
The internal rot.
Yes. He said many would be offended and would betray one another and hate one another. He predicted the rise of false prophets within the church.
And Edwards points out that this was remarkably fulfilled in the sect of the Gnostics.
It was.
We should define who the Gnostics were for the listener, because they play a huge role in this internal betrayal.
Broadly speaking, Gnosticism was a movement that believed physical matter was inherently evil.
And only the spirit was good.
Right. They claimed to have a secret, elite knowledge.
A gnosis.
Yes, a gnosis that elevated them above regular believers. Because they believed the physical body did not matter, they either fell into extreme, punishing asceticism or wild, unrestrained hedonism.
Because what you do with your body doesn't matter if only the spirit is good.
Exactly. And crucially, because they didn't value the physical body or historical reality in the same way, they had no problem compromising with the Roman authorities.
This is where the betrayal happens.
Saw it on. When the Romans demanded that citizens burn a pinch of incense to the emperor and declare him a god, the Orthodox Christians refused.
And they were thrown to the lions.
The Gnostics, however, reasoned that since the physical action meant nothing, they could just burn the incense to save their own skins.
Because it's just a bodily action, not a spiritual one.
Right. They actively joined with the heathens to persecute Orthodox Christians, just as Jesus predicted.
Let's frame the opposition here, because Edwards spends time describing the Roman Empire, and we need to understand the sheer weight of the opponent.
The scale is massive.
This was not a minor local government. The Roman Empire was the strongest the world had ever seen. Edwards describes it as an empire of iron that broke all things in pieces.
It had the wealth of the known world
The greatest philosophers of the age.
and the unmatched logistical might of the Roman military legions.
It was a monolithic, state-sponsored pagan machine. The emperor was worshipped as a god.
To refuse that worship was not just a religious disagreement, it was treason against the state.
So you have a tiny group of fishermen, tax collectors, and outcasts from a backwater province.
Yep.
They have no money, no army, no political influence. They are facing the iron machine of Rome on the outside, and on the inside, their own people, the Gnostics, are betraying them to the authorities.
It looks completely hopeless.
How did this movement survive? It is like a contagion that the Roman immune system simply could not identify because it didn't look like a traditional military threat.
Rome knew how to fight armies with swords.
They did not know how to fight people who sang hymns while being burned at the stake.
A contagion analogy is a great fit. The Romans kept trying to amputate the infected limbs by executing the leaders, but the contagion just spread faster.
Wait, if I am Rome and I see this movement growing and I start executing the leaders, shouldn't that stop the movement?
You would think so.
How did martyrdom actually help them? A skeptic might say, look, they could not even keep their own people alive and they were fracturing from the inside. It was a failed movement.
That would be a strong argument against any normal political movement, except for one glaring fact.
What's that?
The fracturing and the martyrdom were part of the prophecy.
Oh, right.
Christ foretold that they would betray and hate one another, and that they would be killed.
So if everything went smoothly, he would have been wrong.
If the early church had experienced perfect, unbroken unity and universal acceptance from the culture, Jesus would have been proven a false prophet.
The betrayal and the blood validated his foresight.
The very things that should have destroyed them were the things that proved their founder was telling the truth.
The blood of the martyrs functioned as a catalyst, not a deterrent.
Precisely. And the fact that the movement survived both the external Roman persecution and the internal Gnostic betrayal shows a bizarre, almost inexplicable resilience.
What does Edwards attribute that to?
Edwards attributes this survival to the fulfillment of another promise, the arrival of the Holy Spirit.
Jesus told them to tarry in Jerusalem until they were endued with might from on high.
He told them he would give them a comforter, a spirit of truth, who would guide them.
And we see that shift happen historically.
According to the historical record, these previously cowardly men.
Men who literally ran away into the dark when Jesus was arrested in the garden.
Yes, those same men suddenly possessed a courage and activity and an eloquence that absolutely baffled the Roman authorities.
They stood before magistrates and spoke with a boldness that could not be explained by their education or background.
Edwards brings in a metaphor from Isaiah 41 here that I think is really striking to explain the mechanism of this shift.
Let's dig into that.
He talks about turning a wilderness into a fruitful field.
And he is not talking about literal agriculture.
No, Isaiah speaks of opening rivers in high places and planting cedars and myrtles in the desert. Edwards argues that this is a figure of speech for a massive moral and spiritual shift.
Okay, unpack the moral wilderness.
The pagan world was a moral wilderness. It was barren of the knowledge of the true God. It was full of cruelty, blood sports in the Colosseum, and the debasing worship of idols.
So turning that wilderness into a fruitful field means bringing a culture of virtue, charity, and rational worship to the Roman Empire?
Yes. Edwards frames this as a work far greater than Moses parting the Red Sea.
That is quite the claim.
Well, parting water is a manipulation of physics, changing the ingrained moral fabric of an entire empire of millions of people. That is a manipulation of the human heart on a massive scale.
It is fundamentally harder to change what a culture loves than to change the weather.
And it happened. Despite the iron of Rome, the gospel was universally published throughout the empire before the destruction of Jerusalem.
Just as Jesus predicted in Matthew 24:18.
The contagion overwhelmed the host.
This movement didn't just survive in the shadows, it conquered specific geographic regions and altered the cultural baseline of the world.
It certainly did.
Let's look at the mechanism of how this cultural shift happened, specifically regarding the overthrow of global idolatry.
The Old Testament prophets were absolutely clear that a primary distinguishing mark of the Messiah would be his victory over the idols of the heathen world.
Isaiah is full of prophecies about the Gentile world turning from idols to the God of Israel.
It was promised as the Messiah's great reward for his suffering.
The scope of this fulfillment is staggering. Edwards lists the regions.
Lesser Asia, Europe, Great Britain, Ireland, and America.
These were places steeped in ancient, entrenched paganism, and we have to remember what everyday paganism actually looked like.
It wasn't just reading mythology.
No, it was woven into your daily life. You sacrificed to the god of the river so your crops wouldn't flood. You burned incense to the god of the harvest.
It was a time-out-of-mind agricultural paganism.
We are talking about the worship of wood, stone, silver, and gold.
The worship of ancient deities like Dagon, Bel, and Nebo.
These systems of worship dictated the seasons, the economy, and the government.
Yet through the influence of Jesus of Nazareth, this ancient idolatry was completely overthrown.
It was not just reformed, it was eradicated. The temples were abandoned or turned into churches.
Edwards makes a brilliant comparative argument here that really puts this achievement into perspective.
Because sometimes we lose sight of how hard it is to change a culture's baseline religion.
It is nearly impossible.
Right. Edwards points out that the greatest philosophers of Greece and Rome, guys like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates,
With all their wisdom, logic, and rhetoric.
they could not stop paganism. They might have mocked the gods in private among their intellectual friends, but the public continued to sacrifice to Jupiter and Mars.
And even looking at the giants of Jewish history.
David, a warrior king with a heart for God.
Solomon, the wisest man with immense wealth.
Moses, who saw the plagues of Egypt.
Elijah, who called fire from heaven.
Abraham, the patriarch. None of them, not a single one, could eradicate global idolatry.
Even the whole nation of Israel could barely keep themselves from worshiping idols, let alone convert the heathens.
The Egyptians did not convert when Joseph taught their senators.
The Babylonians did not convert when Daniel interpreted dreams. The local idolatry remained untouched.
Yet Jesus of Nazareth, a carpenter from a town nobody respected who was executed as a state criminal, accomplished this.
He achieved the total geographic overthrow of ancient gods.
So here is a massive logical question. Okay, if the critics of Edwards' time, or even modern skeptics, believe Jesus was a grand imposter, how do they explain him accidentally fulfilling the biggest, most difficult job description of the Messiah?
This is the logical trap that Edwards sets, and it is brilliant.
Let's trace his deduction.
He says, let us assume for a moment that Jesus is an imposter. If he is an imposter, he is a wicked man, falsely claiming divine authority, leading millions astray.
So God would be angry with him.
Highly angry. We must then believe that the God of the universe, who is deeply jealous of his glory and hates idolatry above all things, allowed this wicked impostor to predict the downfall of global heathenism.
And not only predict it.
Right, but God actually granted this impostor the success of conquering the Roman Empire and destroying the idols.
God would be rewarding a blasphemer by giving him the exact victory promised to the true Messiah.
Spot on. I mean, you nailed it. It is completely unreasonable to think the moral governor of the world would permit an impostor to achieve the greatest moral revolution in human history.
To eradicate the very idols God hates in the name of a false prophet.
It contradicts the entire nature of God as revealed in the Old Testament. God does not share his glory with a liar.
The logic just collapses in on itself. God would not give the ultimate victory to a fraud.
And there is another layer to this trap regarding the timeline of prophecy, which I find incredibly compelling.
Oh, about the window of opportunity.
Yes. Edwards points out that the prophecy is already fulfilled. The ancient idols of the Roman Empire, of Greece, of Babylon, of the Canaanites, they are gone.
Nobody is sacrificing bulls to Mars or grain to Dagon today.
Therefore, the overthrow of ancient heathenism has happened.
Which means the window of opportunity to fulfill the prophecy is closed.
Completely closed.
Yeah.
There is no ancient heathenism left for a future, different Messiah to overthrow.
Oh, that's a brilliant point.
If Jesus is not the Messiah who fulfilled these prophecies, then the prophecies are null and void.
Because the conditions for fulfilling them no longer exist in the world.
The ancient gods are dead. Jesus is the one who killed them.
You cannot wait around for someone else to do the job because the job is already done.
And it was done precisely by the one who stood there and said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, I will do it."
Wow, let's bring this all together. What is the takeaway for you, the listener? Edwards is asking us to look past the familiar Sunday school stories and observe the massive, verifiable shockwaves of Jesus' prophecies.
We have looked at the terrifying, chilling precision of Jerusalem's fall.
The famines, the fiery swords hanging in the sky, the exact timing of the Roman siege at Passover.
We have examined the permanent end of a global sacrificial system.
Caused by the loss of the tribal records, making the old law impossible to follow.
We have seen the survival of a persecuted, marginalized movement against the iron might of the Roman Empire.
And the total geographic overthrow of ancient idols that had ruled human imagination for millennia.
It is a mountain of historical evidence that points to one clear conclusion.
What's that?
The foresight and authority displayed here are not of human origin. The mechanism of history itself was bent to accommodate these predictions.
They cannot be human. And that leaves us with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we have discussed today.
I like this part.
If the historical predictions of Christ reshaped the political and religious landscape of the entire world with such terrifying accuracy,
If the destruction of Jerusalem and the death of the gods happened exactly as he said they would,
what does that suggest about the reality of his future predictions?
specifically his teachings on a future state of final judgment.
Because those predictions are still waiting to be fulfilled. And as we have seen today, his track record is literally perfect.
It forces you to take those future warnings with the utmost seriousness. If he was right about the Roman legions and the fall of the temple, there is every logical reason to believe he is right about eternity.
It is not just philosophy anymore. It is a historical guarantee. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the archives of Jonathan Edwards.
We hope this has given you a fresh perspective on the precision of history and the weight of these ancient words.
It has been a fascinating discussion.
It truly has.
We will see you next time. Keep reading, keep questioning, and keep thinking. Goodbye.